Okay, we're live on the air. This is the Synth Summit Show. This is episode 26, I do believe. And this is a show where basically I interview people in the industry who are kind of behind the products that we all
I do believe.
use and
And
love.
and
And
this is
so this
basically I
episode we have Rob Papen. Am I pronouncing your last name correct?
Oh yeah, just everything is fine. Sometimes they say Papen or Papen. It's a Dutch name, of course, which is a bit difficult, but Papen is okay.
Well,
No
how
problem.
do you pronounce it? Because my family, my mother's side, she was actually born in Holland, so I'm
Oh, if I would speak it in Dutch, it's Papen.
okay. That's close enough. Poppin'. So
Yeah, but in England they often Papen, Rob
yeah.
Papen. That's the. Oh well, that's both are fine.
Okay, I always like to kind of get it as correct as possible, just out of respect, and also, who knows? Maybe in 20 years, people will have the Moog Moog argument over your name.
Okay. Well, that sounded even better, Mook, in the end. I mean, it's at least he has the same front name. I'm also originally called Robot,
Okay, so
so
I'm gonna set up just a couple of quick things on my end here for the live stream. We have a live chat that's in YouTube, and so I'll be watching that as well. And if I don't answer in there right away, that's okay. Like I usually, we talk for a while and then I go back to it. Otherwise, I get too distracted. If anybody has any issues with audio, be it somebody being too quiet, whatever, please let us know in the live chat. There's no way for us to really monitor that audio stream, so it's good. It's good to have feedback on that sort of thing. So getting right into it, let me actually just type this. Issues arise. Please let us know in the chat here. There. Okay. So, uh, where to begin? There's such a history there, and I don't want to call you old, but you've been in the industry for a good while.
yeah,
So I really want to
definitely.
start at the beginning. So where was the start of you first getting into sound design? Like we'll start there, and then we'll kind of we'll toy back and forth with pre sound design work. But uh, the first sound design projects that you were getting involved in.
Well, that was actually the Waldorf microwave number one. So the at that time the rack version of the original PPG, and if I can pull up this image here, let me see. Um, Maybe, yeah, down here you see Andromeda, you see a modular stuff on this picture, but down here I have two microwaves and a access controller to control them. So at that time, we talk about early 90s. We still played in the Peru, which is an old name for a synthesizer band, but it's formed by Peter and Ruth, hence the odd name. And at that time, of course, I already had Jupiter 8, but never played with the PPG. So when the microwave came out, I thought, oh wow, that's interesting because I know the PPG sound from Tangerine Dream, and I always was excited about it. So I went to a shop in Utrecht. They had the rec version there, and I was a bit disappointed in the preset, what I heard, or the first initial preset. So did not excite me that much. So I did contact them, and Waldo said, "Okay, why not bring out a signature card? Because yeah, many people know you from your synthesizer band, and so the signature sound card from for the Waldorf microwave was essentially the first sound set I did. And keep in mind that essentially I was ahead of that, working sometimes in studios, and people heard my sounds on the Jupiter 8 and said, "Oh, can I not have these sounds from you?" Another guy in the Whistlelot studios also had the Jupiter 8. And I said, "No, because, yeah, that was the sound of your band, so you don't share that." And so that was the initial start of my sound design, which was the Microwave One signature sound card. And in the meantime, the whole house scene came up, and I made also a techno card for them, a bit shorter after it, with some house sounds and that kind of stuff. So that was really the start, and that was essentially the first sound sets I made. So I talk about early 90s that I went public with my presets.
Yeah, and the Waldorf stuff to this day is still really sought
Oh
after.
yeah,
I mean that
definitely.
those early Waldorf synths are, looked at very fondly. Both the waves. Did you ever have a chance to mess with the what was it? Was it the Wave XT Plus that had the analog filters on the back end? Those things are pretty rare.
Mm, they are later on. They made the Microwave XT, which was fully digital. And then the one you mentioned, I did not picture that
Yeah,
one. That one had
I've been
again.
trying to find one forever. Like they're really
Yeah, it that will be similar to the microwave, the original one, because the microwave has this wavetable, which is 8-bit wavetable combined with a filter, SAM filter behind it. So some of the purists, and they were right about it, the original PPG 2.2 or 2.3 had a bit more milder sound, a bit more different, milder sound. The microwave with the different filter inside of it was a bit more aggressive. But of course, that's cool. I think if everything sounds the same, that will be boring.
yeah,
So
absolutely. So you worked with Waldorf, and you were creating these sound packs, and they were very well received. What was your feeling about that as you were going into it? I mean, were you nervous to be putting those sounds out there on a much wider basis like that? Was this something that felt like a natural progression for you, or
Um, yeah, I mean, in our band, which was called Peru, so the synthesizer band, I already was the geek who's doing the weird stuff. Although, what I also learned from my fellow musician who had also modeler, sometimes he did, because I'm very technical bass in how synthesizer work, and he was more organic. So sometimes he plugged in something very strange, which I never would do. He would pick out a gate out, for instance, from a sequence and put that directly into the cutoff frequency modulation input, so that you really have a very steep change in the sound. So I would always done that by using an amount control, but then he simply had different sounds. So from what I've learned is that sometimes with synthesizer, you need to go organic and simply do stuff which is not, so think out of the box. So I was at that time not nervous because, yeah, did know my skills already. And of course, it reflected back because that put already the name a bit on the table. So from there on, I did get contact with Ensoniq and made for them a very nice sound set for the ASA 10. And that took off big time. They played the demo songs in the music stores as a background. So there was always because it has a nice sequencer on board. So, and then, yeah, Emu popped up. I made a sound set, a own production of a CD-ROM for the emulator range, the EOS, the emulator 4 range of samplers, so the emulator 60,400, these range, and I did release that as a own release, but Emu wanted it from the start exclusive. And from there on, I made for them for the Proteus 2000, the Techno ROM card, and so it kept me very busy.
were you involved in that? What was it? Was it the Orbit?
The Orbit 3, not the original Orbit. The Orbit 3, which is very rare, by the way. I have one here. The Orbit 3 has the Techno Synth Construction card and the Beat Garden card inside of it, and still gets regular mails, people asking if I would not have the digital version of it. But if you would go to Punch and my virtual range of synthesizers, you will get the same, yeah, types and styles of sound. So, but the especially the Techno Synth Construction Yard card
Hmm.
was very popular because it was very different. My type of programming was very different from what the original Emu guys did. So
So I'm just I kind of did a quick Google and landed right back at your own site just so people can know, because I know a lot of people that watch this channel are ASR users. So yeah, it's the AS11 and AS12
Twelve,
Technosynth
yeah.
Volume 1 and Volume 2. And then you had the CD-ROM, CDR4 and 14. So I just like to throw that information out there for the guys that like to hunt and dig for sounds and that kind of thing.
Oh, they will find it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so that's I mean, that's fantastic. But then you went from sound designing to having your own company with a VST. Before you started Rob Papen and started doing the actual VSTs and everything, um, what was your first involvement with virtual synthesizers?
Um, yeah, at that time, what was released was Reactor, what I can recall, the Prophet 5 from Native Instruments, and the FM7. That was the first which I could play around a bit. So, and yeah, I was looking around at that time because, of course, if you get a product from a brand, you need to work with the tools they have. So this works this way. So I thought, oh wow, this would be cool to see if somebody could build me a custom VST plugin. So I went to Frankfurt a Messe, talked with Native Instruments, and said, well, yeah, this is me. Maybe an idea to make together a custom synthesizer. But at that time, they had no manpower for it. So I kept on searching. And the first partner I found, which unfortunately did not went well, was with the Albino, which of course many people know, but the cooperation at the end did not work well. So in the end, I had to stop that. And in the meantime, I found a very good programmer, John Iris, which I worked together with now already for 13 years. So he's I'm pretty sure he's one of the best DSP coders on this planet. He's totally amazing. Because picture if I have an idea, okay, I want to like to have an XY pad, John. Could you program that? And he programs that, but then he comes back and said, hey Rob, if you use the right mouse button, you also can make a circle or a spiral in, spiral out. So I have the idea to record it, and then he puts on top of that, he throws a lot more. And that's amazing about this programmer, John Iris. He's absolutely a genius.
Now, you guys do a lot of back and forth when you're programming these synthesizers. How much of it is you like having an idea from the start and then conveying it to them, or is it more just like synergy from the start and you guys are just bouncing ideas back and forth? How does that usually work for you?
Um, well, there is not really. It's kind of it's teamwork. I mean, when I throw an idea, that's for instance, Blade was one idea which I had during jogging. I had the idea if I use now a XY pad, not to go cutoff frequency and resonance, but to control the harmonics of the waveform. So that's when the when the idea starts, and then this I throw to John Iris, and we start discussing and work things out. Sometimes the discussions are very funny because I talk about bananas and he talks about apples, because you need to see that he's a programmer. His mind is different than mine. I'm looking far more on the product as being somebody addicted to sound, great sounds, and somebody who always focus. Okay, guys, it should be having features, but you should be able to make music and useful sounds for making music. So my perspective, my input is different from him. So then we feed back it to each other. He tells about what you can do with the code and what you can do with the code. So it's teamwork, and also people, users of us, bring forward ideas, and if we think it's really good to add this for everybody, we add this because it's not. Of course, I'm from one part. I of course the starting point with many ideas, but it would be a bad thing if everything should be me. That's it. What we want to do, making great products, and we use the creativity of John Iris, of myself, and also the input of the users to make a product which makes people happy. That's all the aim we have, of course. And one example, if you see, for instance, here, Subboom Base 2, I think people can see it also. That's many years ago, somebody said, well, it will be handy to have a kind of quick browser. And so we put it in. So the quick browser, you can see, can go very fast through the presets, and there is a recently browse. So this is helping the producers, which are sometimes having less time. They skip through presets very fast, and then they think, okay, which one was it again? Which was so cool? Then they are lost. So these kind of ideas came back to us, for instance, from an end user, and then we build it in because we think, yeah, this is a great idea.
So that's a common theme that I'm seeing through a lot of your VSTs is that XY pad. That seems to be something that you really like, and for good reason. I mean, it's an easy way to
Mhm.
control multiple parameters at a time. Um, is there a specific controller that you prefer to map that to?
Oh, definitely not. You are totally free. I was discussing today with somebody who uses the a kind of hand controller, which puts that on in data, and I didn't know that it was so easy. Because what if you go here to the right menu in the XY, you can see latch Y and X to a given MIDI controller. So it's up to you. So you can say latch X to MIDI controller 13 and the Y to 12. It's up to you. And once you have this set, it stores it in the general part of this plugin. So if you start it up next time, it's still connected. But if you want to exchange that, you always can go up here, because we have here something called, excuse me, external controller setup. Then you can save this setup as a whole. So that's MIDI latching. Controlling the XY is very easy. And of course, if you have a keyboard with a dial, even that could be interesting, because you can record this dial as a controller. So it's sometimes it's less complex than that people think to do things. Of course, you also could say, I go to the modulation matrix and use there one of the MIDI controllers and use the X or Y movement. One idea that's, by the way, interesting because you mentioned it, the new synthesizer Vecto, we made this for a reason. And there one person had a very interesting idea. Let me see. We can find it. Example patches, modulation, move the dot. Let's see if it's, because there somebody had the idea to use the modulation wheel to control this movement if that one was recorded. So I need to check where I find this preset. Okay. Wheel movement. Here it is. So it's in the example bank. You see wheel movement. If I click here, edit, it comes visible. And now I use the modulation wheel to move this movement. So I can use the modulation wheel from going this one point to another point in. So these are really ideas which did not pop in my mind, but somebody in a forum somewhere. So if something is very useful, then we definitely add it. And of course, we cannot do everything, and you need to keep everything in a one concept. But because it's these instruments are made for the end user, for the one who enjoys it. So the more we can make them enjoy it, that's our part to do
So
it
yeah,
the best way.
with Vecto, you can set, different breakpoints, and then you can, just modulate right on through that with that mod wheel. That's a really brilliant idea. And it kind of takes that whole vector synthesis, the early sequential style and chord style vector synthesis, and kind of makes it in a way that you can control it with just one knob or one mod wheel, and that's pretty neat.
Yeah, and so you see here, this one only has 4 points, but here you can have 32 points in general and in total. That's non-destructive, but you can make it. You can really go wild, and that's the cool thing about, again, John Iris, this program. This is non-destructive, so if you're going back to 4,
And you
I
can
can.
map that movement to anything. Can you map it to, like, say, aftertouch?
Oh yeah, definitely. If I go to the modulation matrix, because here you see XY path, I can pick here MIDI. I can say aftertouch. Where it is? Channel aftertouch, monophonic aftertouch, and I can say in the XY destination, XY path. Yeah, you don't see me playing, but I
Oh, yeah.
use now the aftertouch of the keyboard. Yeah, then you get some very weird stuff. I mean, that's of course the main thing with our synthesizers. You can do so much. I could live stream for hours on telling how cool this is, how cool that is. For it's a whole journey. And last Thursday, I talked about the Subboom Bass 2 and having this string model, which is a Car Plus thing. And that's also an example maybe in how things work in working and making products, is that John did mention this to me, this Car Plus idea, this model. And we did try out this model, but I told him, well, this here it starts, the sound starts here with this short impulse. And I said to John, hey, John, what would it be cool if we maybe, instead of taking the regular noise, one of the waveforms? So we pick also the waveforms, and you can mix between the two waveforms. So you see, it's really teamwork. And but the amazing thing is about that John Iris always does the job, and that's amazing.
I'm gonna just so the people in the chat understand what's going on. I'm gonna share my screen for just a second, just because you have that
Okay,
really
sure.
wide screen, so it makes it a little bit harder for people to see all the details. I'm gonna share.
Mm.
Let me share this. Hopefully, it doesn't get too funky. Here we go. And it'll get funky, but it looks cool, right? This is an intended effect. Uh, but yeah, so this is Sub Boom Bass, and what you're talking about is you do live streams on your channel as well, which is great because it helps people learn your products inside out. And you were talking about the string model, which if you look down this side here, there's your different sections, and then you can get right into the string section here, and then on your oscillators you have your different waveforms as well, and there's a string model in there as well. And if I oh, I'm doing the wrong one here. Go through here. I just wanted to show a quick idea of one of the reasons why I wanted to show this. Hopefully people can hear it. Is the fact that your instruments are kind of known for their low end. They're really known for not just cutting through a mix, but having like a really substantial bottom end to them. And I don't just mean sub boom bass. I mean all of them.
Yeah, they're all very good. Yeah, there's a
And
reason for it.
yeah, that's something that I wanted to get into. But man, that sounds real. Like the model in this sounds like, it doesn't
Yeah,
just sound
and
like modeling. It
yeah,
sounds like so much more than that, you know?
and the cool thing is about the model. It's a string model, but if you go in the oscillator section, I have this bass here, which I made during this live stream. Each oscillator can have this string model, but the oscillator still has the sub oscillator. So if you have a string model which maybe is a bit thin sounding, then you can add the sub oscillator with a sinus or a square and make it really a full bass. So maybe let's play this bass what I have then here. 1 second. So that's a string bass. It
Yeah.
almost sounds like a real bass, but
It
it's
almost
still
sounds like
different.
samples. Like it almost sounds like,
Yeah.
it's really, but that's all modeling, right?
Yeah, this is totally modeling. It's using two oscillators. Let me see. I use both are having a string. What I did in this example, oscillator 1 is more a thinner sound. Let's go to the... But only what we have in the advanced modulation matrix is that the velocity controls the volume of oscillator 1. Only it plays from higher velocity value. So if I play soft, the oscillator 2 is playing. If I play a bit harder, oscillator 1 comes in. And this is the oscillator 1. And the oscillator 2 does more the low end of the sound. So I know if I hit hard, you don't have this attack coming up on it, as if the player plays it a bit harder. But combined together, so these are little tricks to make the sound really alive. And that's what I said about John. The great thing, he adds this model, which is a classic Car Plus model, but we added the other waveforms so that you can do some other stuff with it. But also, if the oscillator is in this string model, you still have the sub-oscillator. And that's the same story, because essentially, I did not know that it was possible anyhow, is that even if you use a sample in Subboom Base 2, you still can use the sub-oscillator. And that's, of course, the advantage of digital things, that you can do tricks which would be not possible, for instance, on a Uno 60 or a traditional sampler. If you have a traditional sampler like a EMU or ASA 10, you cannot add a sub-oscillator, or then you need to add an extra oscillator and make that one octave lower. So these are little tricks which are interesting, and I'm not sure if I can find an example of where there is a sample used.
That's another thing I notice, is that your plugins, right at release, tend to have a ton of presets on them.
Mostly we start out with about 300-400.
Yeah, that's a significant amount of presets for a release, you know?
Oh yeah, but I mean, Predator 2 is... of course, you need to keep in mind that Predator 2 covers a lot of music styles, from psytrance to hip-hop guys, to drum and bass, to house. So you get about 6,000 presets, but not all the presets are your cup of tea, of course. But yeah, I must admit, I'm pretty fast with presets. So sometimes people, it depends on which type sound you're seeking, but I can make presets within 1 minute.
Sure. Yeah, and especially if you're involved in development, you tend to learn the instrument
where it
inside
is.
out,
Yeah.
really from the gate, which is great. Like, that's one of the things that I love being involved in both sides. You know, I get to be involved in, early production of gear, and then also sound design of gear. And the advantage of that is that you start to learn the quirks very early on. You start to find out, okay, well, where were these changes made, and what changes, what did those changes impact the overall sound of the finished product? And now I know, okay, well, this is going to saturate at this point, so I can get, this sound very quickly by just going right to that level and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, yeah, in the process, I mean, if I in another live stream, I talked about where this pole sound came from, which is inside Vecto. So you see here, default patch. That's, of course, this is a pole, which is a metal pole, which was hanging around it's in front of a house. And I sampled this pole. Took me quite long, because you have cars driving past,
Yeah.
you have birds singing, and I don't want to shoot birds in the early morning. So it took me about 2 hours before I had a really clean sample. And I placed a condenser microphone, but also SM75. But the SM75, that did not work out that well. So the condenser microphone, that was the real good sound. And then what I want to tell you, then you have the sound, but you already have in mind how it's going to sound in combination with the synthesizer, because So this is the plain sample, but let me see if I can show you a sound which has it. Yeah, this one, a pole synth. This is the Vector is using this pole sample together with a vocal sound. So then once you added it, then you get of course the final sound. But indeed in this process, you know what is going in there, and then you can respond to it and make use of it. So sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and with Vecto, you can do that kind of D50 thing where you use a sample as an attack, and then
Yeah.
synthesis on the other side, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So that's the Vector is very shortly out, and it really have some great feedback on it. I made even a let's see where it is. I always have to find where it is, of course. Because people, especially the 80s and the 90s guys, said, oh, wow, this reminds me to the Wave Station or the D50, although there are 0 samples on board from these original machines. We have our own range of samples, all on high quality sample rates. But I understand what the vibe is, because if you combine certain metallic sounds together with let's say saw waveforms, you really get sounds like this one. And therefore I called it, you guys on YouTube cannot read it, but it's called De Facto 2019. It's of course a little hint to the D50, but let me play this sound. And then this
Very
one,
D50 style, yeah.
yeah. So if I shut down the oscillator 1, you only hear the oscillator 2, which is a saw waveform. We use a little bit of spreading, and spreading is essentially that one oscillator turns in a 2 oscillator and they detune from each other. So essentially in oscillator 2, it's playing 2 oscillators. So this is more the synth sound. At itself, it's also cool. I mean, even in a track, this also could be a nice sound. But then combined with a FX17, which is a percussion sample, you get this sound. So, and that makes, of course, the D50 at that time very special, because it had this little attack samples combined with the regular, traditional analog build-up construction.
So, let's let's talk a little bit about some of the actual sonic modeling and whatnot. The filters that you guys use, I find that they have a really nice sound to them. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into the basics of doing the filters that you're using, and how you're selecting them, how you're fine tuning that kind of that side of things?
Yes, we are fine-tuning them. We have essentially 2 kind of filters on board, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is more modeled like the Moog system. So therefore, for instance, you hear some very good Moog-style basses in Subboom Bass 2. I mean, and the type 2 is more, you should compare that one maybe with the original PPG or Roland type of filter, more neutral, because the Moog filter is a very different color. So when I make a pet sound, or in the Jupiter 8 style, I always take the 12 dB and then the type 2, because that has a bit different character to it. Let me see if I can have an example of that. So we have, okay, wrong button, manager, ambient.
I'm
Okay,
gonna
this,
share my screen real quick just so that people can get a nice look at Vecto real quick,
yeah.
so that they can see that in all its glory. Hopefully, slightly higher def. If I can get this thing to work. Oh, there it goes. There we go. Okay, so Hopefully people are seeing that. Yeah, you're seeing that. Okay, so that's Vecto right here, and you can see the XY grid that he was talking about, and your modulation section down here, so that you can select right in here. You can kind of go right in and select. I don't know if people are seeing the pop out window. They should be able to see all the pop out windows and everything. Yeah, so um, just kind of showing how that all works. And then, of course, as we were talking about filters, you'll see here he has a large list of filters in Vecto. So everything from 6 dB on through comb filtering and vocal informant filtering, all that good stuff. So that's kind of what got me into wanting to talk about filters. Is there's so many different filters and they all have their own sound. So all right, let me.
Yeah, essentially, of course, a filter is a filter, but for instance, Moog uses a ladder system, which is so. For instance, if I take my Jupiter 8 and the Mini Moog, if I play the saw wave and have the filter open, you don't hear that much of a difference. The moment when you start turning down the filter on the Jupiter or the Mini Moog, you really start to hear the difference in terms of sound. So here, for instance, in Predator 2, I have this pad which is called Mellow Carpet. So it's a carpet which is very mellow. And that one uses a 12 dB filter, type 2, which is more than, it's not the Moog type filter, but more the Roland type. And for pad sounds, anyhow, 12 dB for pad sounds is great because pad sounds make, if you use 12 dB, it leaves open more of the higher harmonics. For instance, therefore, on his original CS80, the pad sounds are great because if I'm not wrong, the original CS80 has a 12 dB filter, not a 24 dB filter. So that makes that you have a very nice mellow top end with a 12 dB filter compared to a 24 dB filter. Yeah, I use the modulation wheel here a bit. You see here in the filter, the modulation wheel you can address to the filter. Okay.
Now, as the sound designer and kind of idea guy, I guess you would really say, right? Do you get into any of the specifics of like, okay, well, we're moving to like zero feedback delay filters, or like this new technology or that new tech? Do you ever get involved in those discussions, or is it primarily
Yeah,
John
we did
who handles all
try.
that?
Well, we did try the zero latency filters on the synthesizers, but I did not get very excited about it. I found them very similar to the Type 2 we have. But for instance, in other plugins, we use it to have a most natural state of doing things. So it depends on the product. And of course, with John and I have a lot of discussion about what you can do with the sound if you do this or that. If I would show you the original RP Verb, we have a second panel in which I was tweaking the sound. So he gave me a whole range of parameters in which I could use to tweak the sound. Therefore, RP Verb has its own sound from that perspective. So I'm not a coder. I mean, I know it's a 0 and a 1, but of course, with John Ives, we have a lot of discussion in how we can improve and influence the sound. So, and from that point, I make different choices than John, because John is always, I should not use too much CPU. But of course, these days, CPU is not a problem anymore. And so we very early adapted to focus mainly on the audio quality, which doesn't mean that we then create a CPU hog, but because John still codes very good and uses the latest technology so that it's still CPU friendly, but that has no influence on the audio quality.
Now, is John a musician also?
He plays a bit of keyboard, but not in the way I was. Of course, I made several CDs, tracks, and music. So he's not coming from an artist side. So, but
I
of
always
course,
find that I always find that to be an interesting aspect is when you deal with developers who maybe, maybe they're not, putting out albums, but do, use the gear that they're creating versus I also know certain developers that have zero interest in making music and zero interest in really even using the gear. They find the technical side of it interesting, but they don't, they're not actively, creating music and using it, uh so it's always kind of interesting to see, what point of view they're coming from, and then you have the artist and idea person on top of that that's kind of trying to convey certain musical language that, isn't always so zero and one. It's, a lot of what we do is much more feel, and it's more, it's art versus science in a way.
yeah, it's artists are of course different in the way they are thinking. It's so I think that's one of the powerful things about the brand as a whole. I mean, I'm the front face, but it's a whole team behind it. I mean, picture Jamal, who makes a lot of great presets for us. These are people are essential to the company. Of course, I'm very well skilled in making presets, but I have a different character than Jamal has. And the cool thing about Jamal, for instance, he's originally a guitarist. He's a guitar player, and John Iris, yeah, he would he did mention to me, I don't like making presets. He hates it. So and I mean, I don't see myself coding, and for him it's a challenge, and we're working now on new products, and we always have fun together because, hey John, let's do this, we have more ideas than we can put out. So we then discuss together, and then for him that is also a challenge, and he throws things at me. Hey Rob, I made this now, should we use this, or is this an interesting idea? And we take it from there. So it's also a big fun part working together on that perspective. And I'm not sure, I cannot talk for other developers. And I guess if a developer himself is not involved in making music himself, he should get people around him which are trustful and have good input to make still a useful instrument.
Absolutely. The user interfaces, who primarily comes up with the GUI, like the actual look of the GUI and that sort of
Um, yeah, well, essentially, that's always my initial idea. So I bring forward to the designer, Hans van Even. I think, well, this is the feel I have for it. For instance, maybe I can show you. That would be interesting for you to see. Let me see if I can arrange that. If I can find it. Pictures. So you're going to see a lot of things flying around here. My cat. But, let me see. Go to. Where is go to?
And while you're looking for that, I just want to I'm going to talk about a couple other things. So, um there's a lot of different Papen effects and instruments. So on the effects side of things, it's not just VST synths. You also have delays, saturation, reverb. All you've got a whole list of effects as well.
Yeah, because I'm a totally. I mean, delay in all music, electronic music, delay was essential, and I must say we have very soon an update of ARPA delay, because in terms of user interface, a few things could be a bit better because it's very complex machine and it's not an easy one, although it has some fantastic presets which you can put on a groove. So we are updating it. But for instance, Opera Reverb 2, I'm very proud about that one, because in that one there is an old idea I had about the reversing of this reverb signal, so it takes the reverb signal and then reverses it, and you can mix between them. You can do some great stuff with it. And of course, originally our Reverb, the first one, was also a big hit because it sounded so good. And there are a big range of fans out there of the Reverb sound because it's dense, it's warm, it doesn't clutter your mix. It has a very good sound, and that's the reason why I'm so keen on having that one is because I'm totally hooked on reverb. And picture that the first time when we went in the Whistlelord studios, there were no digital reverbs. What we did was the Core KR55 drum machine went into the Studio One, which was a big room, from the speakers, 2 GBL speakers, and in the back of the room, you had 2 overheads Neumann. And that's how we did to get the room sound on the snare from this KR55. And these were ideas by Ronald Brandt, which was the engineer. And from that time on, I mean, I was 18 years old or something like that. I was totally addicted to reverb. And of course, nice long reverbs, which are, for instance, used very often by the artist Vangelis. I always love this spacey, long, dance warm reverb. So I wanted to have this sound myself in my own studio. So I talked to John about it, how we could create a very good sounding reverb, and that was the history of this FX, of course. But I want to interrupt you a bit because
just so people know what I have here. Let me click on my screen real quick. So this is the reverb that you were just talking about. Actually, sorry, there it is. I had the delay in front of it for just a second there, and just to.
That's the Reverb 1. There is Reverb 2, and you see in the middle right section there is this reverse part, and that's really a very creative thing for. I made a tutorial about it, and really, if people are into reverb and doing some different stuff, that's really cool. And what's also inside of it is a distortion module, which is great if you use that on drums. Put a bit of distortion ahead of the reverb, and you really changes totally the sound.
And yeah, you can actually bring these over, and you can set your hold times and your reverse times with it, and yeah, you can do some really cool stuff with this.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a very it has a lot of options, but if you would check the tutorial, it's not that hard to understand ARPA Reverb. And of course, the you see in the right corner of the ARPA Reverb 2, you see this mix dial, and that's very handy because this you always can record as a parameter. So you can say, okay, my vocal syncs now, I have a normal hall on it, and on a given moment, I change the mix a bit, and I add this reverse sound. So it's especially for the creative producers that can value this feature.
Yeah, it's really cool looking as well. Now you have some pictures here. Let's trying to bring my window back to the front.
Yeah, what I wanted to show you
PMC,
because we're talking about the user interface and the design, and I wanted to show how that went in progress. Maybe I need to show it. So I'm back again. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's the wrong one. So here you have, for instance, something which when we were talking about the Go-To, I looked this one up and found this one. I thought, hey, yeah, we should have a kind of very modern digital type of thing going on.
Can you enlarge that?
And then you see this is in the middle section. This is Go-To, which is a bit older, but I was not happy about it. So I have a feeling I throw this at the graphic designer, and then in the end I said, yeah, well, I'm not happy about it. So that is in the process, and in the end, so if I go back now here to the final one.
I really like this interface.
And this one is essentially, this one was what it became. So we were on a very late stage when I said, I don't like it. We need to go a different direction. So it's also then from my part, I have something in my mind, an idea. You talk with the designer, and that is Hans van Even. He's a Dutch guy living in France, who does essentially all our plugins except for Bluetooth. He didn't do, and the Predator 2. But you see, this is the back panel. But he does a great job. He is. Um,
Oh, I like that you have the credits right there on there too. So it's always nice to be able to
yeah,
kind of
and
like,
we always
it's kind of like liner notes on an album, you know, like when you would get an album back in
yeah.
the day and you'd really enjoy it, you could look up, oh, well, these horn players were these session players at this studio, and you know, you could kind of dig into that stuff. So I like seeing that.
Yeah, yeah, and we also add always a warning. If you have the back panel, there's always a warning.
It's always
You
good.
should you should read them. But you see, in this whole process, also, yeah, you work together with people, and Hanson even really has some very good skills in creating some fantastic user interfaces.
So let me ask you about some speculative and future things for the company. What about iOS? Have you guys considered that at all?
Well, we did regular this request, but it takes time to develop. I'm not sure if we want to gain a certain audio quality, if that would run. Maybe on the new Pro ones, that will be maybe not a problem. And uh, the iPad Pro, for instance. Um, but in my opinion, if you are making music, yeah, you want to happen it in a system which is in your studio, and you can record it and finish your tracks. And if you have something cool on the iPad, you need to connect it again. And
I'm seeing
so,
a lot more people using iOS. Like it's become its own workflow. So that's kind of why I ask. And I had some questions in the chat about that as well. But I do see a lot
yeah,
more people that are coming at iOS as its own workflow, its own environment, which is interesting. It's not really for me. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I buy a ton of iOS synths and music apps, and I use them very sparingly. Like, I like them. I
yeah, it's
would even say
cool.
I love
Yeah.
them. I don't actually use them as much as I buy them.
Yeah, it's yeah, but still, I mean, what you picture that you would have go to, it's really it's all its core data, all its core CPU. So we would not cut down on anything, but it and maybe it would run on an iPad Pro very well. But then you still need to record it, and you need to have an external audio card for having good audio, because the headphones output, okay, it sounds, but you really want to have a good DA converter
Yeah.
for having a good solid sound. And then, yeah, I'm not sure if then there is much room left on the iPad for doing also some recording. So yeah, I think it's on a radar. We built our synthesizers basically from core C++, so we don't use this platform which is called Juice,
Sure.
which makes it easier to go from one platform to another. We use Juice only for Prisma. That's the instrument we have for stacking the Rob Papen instruments. So sure, we keep an eye on it, but currently, of course, our workload is already full, and the main focus is still on generating instruments for the regular PC or regular Mac computers. Oh, sure, we keep an eye on it, and I picture that maybe in 2-3 years you have a full HD thing like this, essentially like a laptop, which yeah, in which you can do some amazing stuff. So that will be the future. I think that's so we need to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people are saying, yeah, they also use it as a live keyboard rig. Basically, replacing a rack keyboard rig, and that's kind of how I like to use it. Like when I use my iPad, I have a dedicated
Mhm.
audio interface for it, and I can just interface with my MIDI keyboards, and I tend to use it in that way as well. I like to use it almost as if it was a hardware synth.
Yeah.
And I have
Yeah.
friends that use it, and they have their own, like, way of mapping, and, like, they have their own workflow, which is really cool. But yeah, I definitely get the point of, being concerned about keeping the same audio quality, and I think that's coming, though. I think it's definitely getting.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So yeah, that will be. I think that will be a very cool thing. That essentially the iPad would be a hardware synthesizer. But the problem in general is the iPad. Where is it? I mean, it's upstairs. Oh, well, my wife is playing hunting games. You know, this all these games we're playing. So you need to dedicate it also for only music. So keep it in the studio. But essentially, what you say, it would be a great live synthesizer. If for instance, if you would have then an iPad with maybe Vector on it, Bluetooth or whatever on high quality with a good quality audio output and with a nice keyboard, you have a top quality hardware synthesizer. So absolutely agree to that. So but I'm not sure if everybody does see it that way. So when the first synthesizers came out, I thought, yeah, well, then they have to search for the iPad. Where is it? I mean, I'm watching Netflix on it now. So yeah, you need to treat it then really as an instrument, and then it would be is indeed for on stage would be great. I totally agree on that. It boots up very fast. You have fantastic sounds, and so we keep an eye on it, but it needs quite some reprogramming, of course, also to make it on the screen. I mean, Go 2 maybe would be possible, although it has a lot of information already.
Yeah, you would
So
definitely
then,
wanna, like, break out the screen, like, the user interface would have to change, but the fact that
yeah,
you use
definitely. Yeah.
XY so often is one of the things
Mhm.
that brings me to that point, because 'cause I'm like, obviously a touchscreen kind of does that. The, we were talking before the show, and you're on a PC right now. Do you use Mac often? And, have you seen, like, it seems like they're moving towards bridging iOS and Mac OS together. So hopefully, eventually, they'll catch up with like 10-year-old technology and make touchscreen MacBooks. But um,
Yeah, it's touchscreen is great. It's I think with the MacBook, yeah, that would be handy to if you could combine together. That's already happening on some of the PC laptops that you can
yeah,
have it.
I bought my daughter for Christmas. I got her a
Yeah.
Microsoft Surface Pro, and she's 12 and getting into drawing, so she wanted a nice drawing pad. So I
Mm.
looked them up, and man, I threw some. Yeah, I had to set it up before Christmas, okay? So I threw some audio software on it, and man, that thing flies. Like, it was really cool. So,
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking what you can do these days with current. I mean, my PC here is already, I think now 5 or 6 year old. I need a new one, but it takes about a week before you are running again. So I'm keep postponing it. But essentially, it's a 4-core i7. It has a SSD, and what you can do while making music, it's amazing. But if you would take a modern new computer, I mean, you don't see the CPU moving. It's ridiculous what you can do. It's absolutely ridiculous.
how do you feel about I mean, clearly if you look in the back of your screen, you could see a ton of hardware. So have
Yeah.
you guys considered getting into hardware?
Oh, that's a whole different story. Of course, I'm not a coder, but I'm definitely not somebody who can work with resistors and that kind of stuff. And even one person mentioned, "Well, Rob, you should make one hardware thing, at least one box with one dial, so that you have a Rob Papen dial." You know, that's funny. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, if I would make a hardware synthesizer, what would it be? I mean,
Well, let
it's
me
a
let
lot
me
of
just let me just throw this out there, and I'd like to kind of hear your thoughts on it, because this is kind of new. This is new information, like pretty much as of NAM, I guess. The Elk platform. So
okay, yeah.
you have your Reason, synth. Elk platform seems to be making it easier to go from Reason to hardware. Is this something that you've looked at all, or?
Not really. Yeah, well, there was already many years ago a kind of hardware synthesizer with a screen, which essentially was a computer inside of it with a screen on it. I think it moves that direction, but there is one disadvantage, which I think it is. Picture that I would make a hardware synthesizer with top quality DR converters on it, which would with a lot of dials on it, and it would be, for instance, a kind of Bluetooth. So you have some fantastic Bluetooth sounds, and then I would sit there on an AM show, and then people would say, "Oh, Rob, how much is it?" And I have to say, "Well, it's $4,000." Okay, Rob. And if I have a good computer with a good audio card and Bluetooth as a software synthesizer, would it sound the same? And I would have to say, yeah, it would sound the same. So people would invest then to their home computer with a good audio card and have Bluetooth then on that subject. So I don't see people buying a 4K keyboard or a Bluetooth.
Well, now we're back to you sound designing for Waldorf, maybe with the Quantum, because that's a 4K keyboard.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah, yeah.
for the record, I'm not slacking that thing. I want one. So
No, but I mean, now I found it totally fantastic. Moog did bring out a fantastic polyphonic synthesizer again, and I mean, I'm of course a software guy, but I'm totally happy that the hardware synthesizers are there to stay. I mean, I'm totally happy that that is still the case, because I had one guy who had a training here. I did trainings here in my studio about 10 years ago. It ended up in this book. But this guy told me, "Well, Rob, I'm the whole day behind my computer because of my work. When I'm home, I want to play synthesizers and then have hardware." That's a logic thing. Or that people say, "Well, my workflow is with hardware." Well, perfect. So I'm still happy that there's a lot of good hardware synthesizers released, and this whole Eurorack modular stuff, it's awesome. A friend of mine makes this Reebach. Maybe you should get contact of him. It's very nice modules, Eurorack modules with a different sound, and he's releasing that. It's called Reebach, and it's great. I mean,
you'll have to type that name into the chat for me so I can.
Okay. I'm going to type down. Reebok.
But yeah, as far as Eurorack, I mean, that's another platform where you're starting to see a lot more powerful digital modules come to be. I don't know if you've seen it, but have you seen the ER301 and the Percussa SSP? Both of those are essentially computers in your rack. I have the ER301, and that's an interesting platform. The SSP is considerably more powerful. It's also considerably larger and more expensive, but it is but those platforms in general, like the 301 uses Lua language, and it's interesting to see that stuff because a lot of times you want to get to modular to get away from diving into a computer or that feel.
Sure.
With the 301, at least, it's pretty cool because it's kind of like a modular environment inside of a modular environment. So you still have all the patching power of individual modules because there's a ton of patch points on it, but you have this ability to where, for instance, like I got to get out of the way. This little rack right here is, I can take that on the go, and it's got my 301 and it's got my sequencer in it, and I can literally do complete patches with just that, which is, it's its own workflow and it's fun. And I can create interesting effects and whatnot. So point being, would you guys ever consider like doing, like partnering up with somebody to do, effects or a synth module or something like that? Cause I know you have a 5U modular in your setup.
5U and
Your synth.com.
Oh yeah, there it is. The
I love how you're like 5U. I have a huge synth.
Yeah, I don't know if I can grab the webcam so that the people can see it a bit. Let's see. There it is on the left.
Yep.
That's the it's a synthesizer.com system 22. You can they have a kind of built up where you can stick your own modules. It has 2 oscillators. One oscillator is not precise tune, but I use it as an LFO. Then I have a mixer. From there, it goes into a multi-mode filter, which is more Oberheim stuff with a mixer output, so you can have bandpass and notch at the same time. And then it has a Moog ladder filter type. It has 2 envelopes and some divider stuff. And I use that one on this book DVD because if you patch things, it's very good to show people how essentially subtractive synthesis work, because a synthesizer is connections together. It's connecting the keyboard to your oscillator so that you can play the notes and that kind of thing. Oh, let's put back the oops.
Yeah, the you know, the idea that these smaller chipsets are becoming more powerful, you know, it gets people thinking, because you've got things like the Minilog XD. I have the Arturia Micro Freak right here. You know, these things have digital oscillators in them with analog filters, and it's like, and you're starting to see like open source things happening, and so
Yeah, I could
that's
picture that you could have, for instance, a oscillator which would be like Blade, where you can control the harmonics. So, but yeah, I'm not too much into chips and how this all works. So if you have here, because that's different. With static waveforms with Blade, it looks a bit spacey, but you can use here's a spectrum analyzer. You can go to a default preset.
this synth is one that I've been using, and I gotta say it is really cool. Like the additive synthesis on this is just like, it'll
Yeah,
mess your head up.
I must say it's what I call really a I'm not sure if it's good English, trial and error set, because sometimes you
Yeah,
run into something fantastic. Sometimes it's totally crap because it's harder to control. But you see here that we have this harmolator. So you can use, say here, odd even. So you can mix between the... So essentially when I go, this is a saw waveform down here. Then I go to a
and you
square
get a
waveform.
square. Yeah,
Or that you say a ripple and make the ripple in a waveform, you see? So it's a very... by the way, that's maybe new info, but we are looking for making Blade 2 maybe at the end of this year with some other stuff inside of it that you can draw your own waveform more in the way as you can do it in Predator 2, and with a different new oscillator which John did throw at me, which is very interesting. And
yeah, I
so
love
Blade
Blade.
is...
I use
yeah.
that considerably. I mean, it's really fun. And you know what's really great about it is you could do some really cool evolving stuff with it, but one thing that I really like with it is actually doing percussive stuff with it, because you can
Cool.
really pick and choose your harmonics with it, and you can
Yeah.
get like these interesting variances so that each hit is a little different, kind of like a real instrument. And yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, so this XY is of course cool to control that with the harmonics, but yeah, the velocity this velocity you can put on the so what I did now on the even or odd harmonics. So let's see if that works. Now the velocity controls the even and odd harmonics. You can bypass it here. So I made one live stream about a Blade because once you know how it works, it's still very user friendly, but you need to know a bit the concept of it. But still, it's sometimes you run into terrible sounds, and sometimes they are utterly brilliant. One of my favorites is always this Winter Ends. And this was, by the way, the first time that we showed this on NAMM show, and people really were, oh, what's this? You know, they saw all these dots. And essentially, it's polyphonic. Each note has its own movement. So it's very controllable. You can say edit so that you can see it, and you see the movement. Okay, by the way, I'm just totally missing the YouTube chat room because I'm talking so much.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm monitoring it, and yeah,
Okay.
people were basically talking about how they'd like to see resynthesis in Blade 2, to where you can kind of resynthesize samples with it, which I think could be very interesting because with that type of synth, I could see that working. You know?
Yeah, then you analyze, and then you need to have a certain length. I'm discussing this with John because that's you need to watch out that it's not totally CPU intensive. But what you would get, for instance, what would make Blade interesting then, for instance, you pick a pan flute, you totally take that just like it would be like a sample, but then you still could use the harmonizer to control the harmonics. So then you can go totally wild in another direction. So Blade 2 is on the radar, and of course this idea what they popped up is also on our radar. And the other thing which we are will be working on is on updating Punch to Punch 2. So one reason why we're also updating is the Blade, for instance, has this old system from Bank, the original Bank system from original VST. Original VST had a Bank, which was 128 presets, just like hardware was. But now all the other brands jumped over to making one preset, one single file. So we do this also in the latest release, like Raw Kick or Vector or Predator 2, or they are single files. So that's what moving away from this system that you have a bank which is containing all the presets. Sometimes people get
I do like the idea that you can kind of you know, you have these categories, so like you can, for instance, um on the reverb, for instance, you can select between vocal and instrument, and you know, so you know, will you still have tagging or you know that sort of thing where you can go into genre?
Yeah, well, in the FX we don't have this, but in the FX section we have particular banks which are fully dedicated to percussion and drums,
Yeah,
vocals. Yeah, that's more each bank has it. But let's see, if you go to Vector, we have this in all our systems now. The bank manager, we added a few things which are very handy. So you can give it a favorite. So if you like this preset, for instance, if you like this pan flute, so you can give it a star, so that you easily can find back, because there are many banks, which presets you like from this particular bank. But there's also this search category. And if you say, okay, I want to have all the pads which are inside Vector, and there are many, you have them all here, and you
yeah,
can,
that's what I was getting at. Yep.
yeah. So if I would click now on this pad and would say, you see 90s ambient choir, that one is in the ambient bank. You see it on the right side. And then, so I have this. And if you want to say, I want to have one which is bright, and then you also have the ones which are. So this narrows down the search. Of course, essentially each you see already in the right section that we have dedicated banks already, but it helps for sure. So some bank manager can be very handy.
What aspect of, you know, when you're coming out with these new synths, what would you say is the most stressful aspect of it?
Good question. Well, actually, is the stress afterwards with if everything goes well with updates on this server, with the downloads, if there is not a major bug which is causing problems. So it's more on the business side, or how you call it, compared to the creating side. So that's always a stress moment. So if the moment when we release Subboom Base 2, is it going to work with the emails? If people request an upgrade, that kind of stuff is making in general a lot of stress. I had a lot of stress earlier because of the tutorials. The tutorials take a lot of time, and they come not easy. And I learned a bit how to do them in a good way, because if you would have a tutorial which is 3 hours, nobody will watch it because that takes too long. So it's always need to have little steps in where you show as good as possible what to find in a product. And for instance, this RPverb 2 tutorial took 3 days, and that's a lot of days. And so I'm always grumpy, very bad mood, and I'm doing tutorials. And once finished and it's good, I'm happy. So, but my original language is, of course, not English. I'm Dutch, and so that takes a little bit of extra attention. But so I'd start also doing this live streams because, I thought there's so much to tell about synthesizers and the products we have. So, for instance, I had at one trade show somebody saying, "Oh, is there the Aperturator and Predator? Didn't see it." So there's much to tell, and people have less time. They want to make music, and so I always try to keep the tutorials very compact, strict to the point. And then the live streams, people can ask questions, or we dive into certain subjects. Like I have made one about my Jupiter 8. I'm a big fan of the Jupiter 8 because that instrument was my first big synthesizer, so I'm emotionally totally bound to it. And I made a video about it, how I used the Jupiter 8 and the knowledge at that time to make pads, how I use that also again in the virtual synthesizer in making the presets and making them, for instance, a kind of pseudo stereo stuff, things going on. So, and that's the fun part, to show that, everything has a kind of origin, and the pad sounds, all the pad sounds of the Rob Papen I create have the origin in the Jupiter 8.
So I want to get into just a couple of specific things on different instruments that you have. Punch. I love Punch. I think you can really make some awesome sounds with it. Punch also has a bass drum version of the plugin, and I find that kind of interesting. What was the thinking in deciding to do the bass drum version, as opposed to just having the whole thing there? Is it a workflow thing, or what was your thought?
No, this really popped up more from the perspective from what I heard back from the producers. I know this is Punch in the complete control setup. And what I heard is that a lot of Dutch dance producers kept on stacking bass drums. And some I heard, well, I put 6 together and to get a real bass drum. And so I thought, in Punch, you can stack up a few, 2 of them from the bass, and from the other models, you can make a bass drum. So I thought, let's make, based on Punch, this Punch bass drum, where you can simply stack 6 bass drum on top of each other. And so that was essentially the idea. And of course, while I like to tweak, a lot of other weird stuff popped up in Punch bass drum. So if I did not check.
I have the bass drum up right now so that people can see it. So
just
this is
show
the
it to
bass drum
them.
version, and you can see down here at the bottom. This is where you have your stacks.
Yeah, and of course you can. Oops, you can combine then the essentially models together with samples. And what I found cool is if it's tuned. So I have, for instance, the hip hop bank tuned. You got really some a conga combined with a kick. And it's tuned. So that's thing which I found cool, because the originally the Dirty South style, they like to experiment. That doesn't make it so that any of the Punch bass drum sounds will come up in a track. but I'm inspired by their thoughts and by their idea, by thinking out of the box, and then I simply create presets. This one is a bass drum combined with a timpani, so timpani, but it's very dark filtered, so you get some very different tunes. They hear a little tambourine. So it's very creative by stacking the bass drum. And the funny thing is that when I showed Punch Bass Drum on the NAMM show, the tech guy from Stevie Wonder, it's called Robert, a very nice guy, and he said, "Oh, that's cool. I need to tell this to Stevie Wonder, because Stevie Wonder at that time, when he was in the 70s, he also wanted to stack bass drums. So that's a cool story." And then he came over to my booth on the NAMM show. But it's not only Stevie Wonder who comes
It's always
there.
his entourage. Yeah.
And it's the whole crowd around it. So I hardly could demo, but I thought, oh, let's shoot a picture with the Stevie Wonder. So that was cool, and that he came over, and he knows the Rob Papen brand, so that's very nice. And but that's always a big happening. And the fun part, what I found of it, was that, yeah, he already was stacking bass drums at that time, working, thinking about it. So it's really a guy who was thinking out of the box in terms of recording and making music, and that's what I love.
Yeah, every time I go to NAMM, he's on there's like a checklist of like people that you're gonna see at NAMM. And
Yeah,
so I'm always like, yeah, he's always on that list, but he's easy to spot because you'll see
yeah.
NAMM is
This-
crazy because you'll have extremely famous people and there'll be no
yeah,
crowd around them. Like they're just, they're just everyday people, and that's fine. And then Stevie walks by and it's just a circular swirl of
yeah,
people
yeah. Around it, yeah, you will notice. Oh, that Stevie is coming. You will notice right away. Very cool.
Yeah, that's definitely he's always like top of my list whenever I'm at NAMM. I'm like,
Yeah,
where's
yeah.
where's Stevie at?
So that was the reason why I did Matt Stevie Wonder, because Punch Bass Drum could stack also bass drums. Funny, isn't it?
So there's that, and then there's sub boom bass. And sub boom bass, so like Punch does really great kicks and all, but sub boom bass can also do some really hard hitting low end percussion as well.
Yeah, I mean, the initial idea was for someone bass to make it urban and to have this really low, and you feel more the bass than you hear it. So the this kind of sound. So very deep basses, but I thought, yeah, well, that's maybe too basic. I always like to seek new directions. So already with Subboom Bass 1, we had the combination that you could have a traditional oscillator combined with a sample. And what I did is tuned samples. So for instance, this bass sound, which is called CA Hollywood, so California Hollywood, uses a regular oscillator combined with a tube sound. So the tube really makes the attack, which essentially is a plastic tube, which I dropped on the floor. And then the oscillator 1 is essentially a half sine. So you really combine the best of both worlds. There's a little FM inside Subboom Bass. So at that time, it was not only for classic basses. So it went not only in the hip hop, urban stuff. I mean, Tim and Rob, they are big producers in this area. I did a lot of famous acts, and Subboom Bass they use always Subboom Bass, and but also the guys who make house, techno, dance music, because it has some very good basic bass sounds on board. And I think it's very focused, and that makes it, of course, a very popular product. And with Subboom Bass 2, we added the bank manager, we had and added this string model to add again more creative sound options in Subboom Bass. So Subboom Bass 2 is really a very finished product. There is wave sequencing. That's also an idea which we had in the first Subboom Bass 1. so that in the sequencer, each step can have its own waveform. So you got a kind of wave sequencing. So if I go here to the manager,
Yeah, I'm showing it as well so that they can see a little bit clearer window of it.
yeah, here you can see this is one of the original presets. And what we then increased in Sublime Base 2 is the screen so that you can see oscillator 1, oscillator 2. Here you can pick a different waveform. So now on a given step, there is another different sample player. So and if you combine that with a groove, let's see if a groove is playing here on my system. Of course, I need to play on time to hit the sequence right.
That's
but this is a very, yeah, it's a totally creative machine. And of course, also here, some basic bass sounds, which are really very good. So classic minimal style basses, but also cool stuff and totally out of the planet stuff by Jamal. So yeah, it's I mean, each instrument what we have is at itself a journey, and that's the cool thing about it. There, you don't get bored if you're a bit into tweaking synthesizers. There's always something new to discover.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'll start to close out the show now. We've been on for about an hour and a half, so I think that's fair.
Oh, yes. Yeah, once I start talking, I keep on talking. Sorry.
Well, no, it's perfectly fine, and trust me, that's definitely not the longest show. I think Paul Schreiber still has the longest at about 3 hours.
That's long. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Paul is a great talk. So but yeah, this has been great, and I really appreciate you coming on. So
my pleasure.
Vecto is the newest, and Explorer 5. Now, Explorer 5 is how you basically get everything in one package.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about Explorer 5 real quick?
It has all the products, all the FX, and all the synthesizers. It doesn't have Prisma. Prisma you can request if you did register your product, and Prisma is for free. Then you can stack your own instruments, or I mean the Rob Papen instruments together. So here you see a patch, which is 2 layers of Bluetooth. So essentially, you can stack together. Max is 4 instruments, and Prisma you can request as a additional free gift from us to the users. And of course, it makes most sense if you have the Explorer 5 burner. But even if you have only, let's say, Go 2, you can load in Go 2 and stack yourself Go 2 tries. So this is twice Bluetooth.
So it's kind of reminiscent of you remember when Native Instruments had Core?
Yeah, but I didn't never use it, but I heard that it's a bit similar because Core was also kind of host, isn't it?
Yeah, Core was actually really, really good, but I know for a fact that Native Instruments had just a ton of headaches with it, as far as on the development side, and I think that's why it ended up not continuing on. But yeah, what's really great about this is just like you were showing in some of the other synths, how you can layer like an attack of like a sample or whatever, except you can do it with an entire synth, like layer, like, do a shorter envelope section for one synth and then have, the back end of another. And then you can get into some really interesting presets, and then you can save that as a preset in there.
Yeah, and next time when you start up your song, I mean, you can, if you have 4 tracks in your host and you play 4 pads, you also have a stacking sound. But if this mix between them, it's only in this song. So if you want to do the same nice sound you had there, you want to do this in another track, you have a lot of work. And Prisma essentially is a layer machine. It's like a kind of multi-mode for the Rob Papen plugins. And you see here, Bluetooth is twice loaded. And the layers, you see that has an edit page. You can edit all the parameters if you want. You can customize this. The multi-control page is 4 faders which you can address to the parameters. So for instance, here, the
So it's like a macro.
yeah, it's so this fader 1 is connected to layer 1, and one of the attack time, and also the attack time of layer 2. Well, it's not used on this one. I don't know why, but so just by using 4 faders, you can control multiple paths and even the 4 FX, and you can use even, that's the cool thing which we built in, you even can use punch inside of it. Normally, punch, it would be that you have on each drum sounds. But with the Prisma, you can trigger the grooves which are inside punch. So you also can go here and have Predator together with Bluetooth and punch playing. And you see here in the layer, if you go down in the edit page of punch, so you have the parameters you can, but here you can see the keyboard layout. So you have inside punch, you have 4 grooves and 4 breaks, which you can create a kind of rhythm. And simply by hitting the note, it, instead of playing punch the normal way, it triggers the groove. You see now the fader is used to have less arpage. You can really do some cool stuff for creative people, or making really super pads by using simply multiple instances of synth. So if I go to super pads here, where is it? I just pick one, just random. Of course, you see up there, it needs to load. Because it needs to load the plugin. You see that also here Blade is used together with Bluetooth and Predator 2 in making one sound. And you can use here
and you can map those macros as well, right?
Oh yes, you can MIDI latch it. But I see a little bug here. I need to check this, because I see that some things don't pop up here. It seems to reset. We just had this new version which also can load Vecto. So for instance, if you only use Vecto, you still can say, I use Vecto. Here you pick Vecto and you stack yourself 2 nice pad sounds together, and then save this as your own preset. So tons of options by using Prisma. So the Explorer 5 bundle is not only the Explorer 5, but with Prisma you add really an additional dimension to everything.
Absolutely. We're also getting a question in the chat about your book.
Yeah.
And your book / I guess it's DVDs as well, right?
Yeah, 4 DVDs. Oh, let me
And
see.
if you were ever considering on revisiting that and continuing on with that.
Well, the content is finished, definitely, because it talks in one way about subtractive synthesis, in a way that everything is covered there, because everything outside there is what is more like, for instance, it does talk about envelopes. It does say attack, decay, sustain, fade, and release. But there are, of course, multi-stage envelopes in modern synthesizers. But these are variations on a given theme. So if you know this as a base, the rest is additional information, and it very often depends on the brand and so on. And so if there would be not an addition, because this is really the story about subtractive synthesis. And for people who are maybe very deep into modular stuff, maybe they don't need it, although you never there's always something to learn. I would say so. The disadvantage currently with this book is that it's almost sold out. It's having indeed 4 DVDs. You can see it. And it's really a good book for if you want to learn more about subtractive synthesis, which is the most popular synthesis. I mean, FM synthesis is great, but it's not as popular as a Nord Lead or a Virus or a Minimoog or a Predator or a Massive, which are all subtractive synthesis. So the way I teach it is by using this image. Therefore, it's called the 4-element synth. So if you may be a senior programmer, then it's maybe not that interesting for you. Although there's always something to learn, because while I was writing this, I also did learn a few things which were somewhere in the back of my head. But when I had to explain it, I thought, oh boy, it's in fact this way. Because did you know that essentially the volume dial on your synthesizer, if you have a regular Minimoog, is not the volume, but it's the envelope amount or which you are turning. It's the amount control of the envelope.
Yes.
So these little things pop up then, and then you need to explain it. And but it's almost sold out. There are a few copies left. In the new reprint, it will not have any more the DVDs. Most likely they will go into the cloud. And I'm talking to a big publisher about, they wanted to have this book already, but a publisher in America, Leonard, everybody knows that, I guess. They make a lot of study books. And because this book is really a very good book if you are new to synthesizers and want to learn how do they work from the base. It's really a basic training. It's not a book about my plugins or Predator as a whole. No, it's about how subtractive synthesis work and how you as a user can understand it better, know the system behind it. And it has been proven as a very good teaching method, what I did bring forward. So maybe by just putting it out in Leonard, that it would drop in even more schools as a kind of method. Because you need to picture, for me, is everything logic. But if you're new, you're a DJ, you're DJing and you want to produce music, you start with Ableton and you get a lot of synthesizers. And then suddenly, you see, for instance, a Massive or a Predator 2, and then you see all these dials, you totally get in panic. And what they do from one preset to another, and that's what they do. They don't dare to turn the dials, and that's the book about, so that they more conscious working with synthesizers. Because if you have know how the basic works, you know that yourself can. If you know the basic, it's not that hard.
Yeah, and then it translates from one synth to the next, and getting that information and having a solid footing on that really translates to how you can utilize other gear. Be it something new and strange, versus something older. A lot of it is still, even today, when you're seeing new FM synths and granular synths, they're still using a lot of subtractive techniques on top of it. Like, if you notice, the new FM synths all have filters on the end of them as well. So they're not just FM, but they're FM plus subtractive,
Yeah, that's exactly what you see with Bluetooth, because what I was missing with FM synthesis was a good filter. But picture the original DX7 when it came into the studio. It was 1983. I had the Jupiter 8 with all the dials and buttons, and there was the DX7 with one slider. So I had something like, what's this? I really have a lot of respect for the programmers who did the factory patches at that time. They did a great job, because DC moving around.
Even with the DX programmer, even then, you still have to look at it as like, man, that was like a completely alien technology at that time. And it's like, even if you have a full scale FM program, like, FM is still extremely different than programming.
I totally agree on that, because somebody asked me, Rob, would you like to write a book about FM synthesis? There's, by the way, a Dutch guy, Ernst Bonens, who wrote a very good book on this. But I told him, it would be a very thin book, because essentially I know in my head what it does. But it's on FM synthesis. You need to stop at the right moment. When it's good, it's good. Because if you turn one little thing different, just like distortion, the sound is totally different. And so what I thought, and that's the idea why Bluetooth came in mind, because I thought, yeah, FM synthesis is very good for percussive type of sounds, typical FM sounds. But what I missed in the original synthesis, which was on the DX7, is that you could not pitch envelope a operator or one of the oscillators. So we added that, and of course we added a very good filters and other waveforms. So Bluetooth is far more a combination of subtractive together with the best of FM, and that's joined together. And but that was not possible in 1983. Picture that you have an FM7 with 16 analog filters on board, then it would be, I think, $25,000 instead of $5,000, what it was at the very start.
Yeah, I'm just kind of pulling some stuff up here real quick, just to kind of. Jamal always has these nice layers and whatnot in there.
Yeah, definitely.
He's got the low splits and I don't know how well you guys can hear that because I can't monitor it, so I'm just kind of.
Yeah. Well, yeah, one thing maybe I want to show, I did show that a few times. You have one preset which is in Bluetooth, which is called Suraris Jamal. And this is a wonderful preset. And what I tell to people, sometimes I do a little masterclass about synthesis, and then I tell people, don't be afraid to shut down some oscillators. Maybe you run into a very nice new sound. So this sound is that itself very cool. He uses the chord memory down here. But what I did is shut down some oscillators. Let me see which one it was. And I only kept one alive, which is B. And listen to this sound. I really went out of my plate because they found it so great. So what I want to tell is that you don't have to always make things from scratch. Sometimes by simply picking out a waveform, or in this case, shutting down the waveforms, you get run into something which gives you goosebumps,
Let me see if I can. And this is one of the arts. I don't know if can you hear that?
I can hear it.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it's coming through or not. But yeah, I mean this is actually this is one of the kind of go-to synths that I use. That it's kind of like a hidden gem too. Like I don't always see it talked about as much as I think it really deserves. But
Oh yeah, but we sold quite some of them, so it has its own share of users. Of course, the ones which are like to add a deep or simply use the presets. It has some great pad sounds. Yeah, what we did in Bluetooth is adding also a range of samples. So it has FM synthesis, it has the traditional subtractive, but also a range of samples. So then you can go totally wild in terms of, and of course the XY. No, that's the wrong preset. Yeah, now I'm totally lost track. Let's go back to the manager. Oh, you're playing some fine.
let's see if I turn it up. Maybe you can hear it loud. I don't know if the the stereo panning will come across through the YouTube feed, but that's another aspect of it that's really great. Like
Okay.
the spatial effects of it is really nice.
Well, this is a Haslinger move. You see something which is also back in vector. Here you see down here vector synth. Then you can use the XY to control oscillator A, B, and C, and D. So there are around it also amount controls where you can address other parameters. But in vector synth mode, it controls the vector part of oscillator A, B, C, and D. Okay. Yeah, I see one question from somebody. I'm just checking. What is Rob's favorite VST from other companies? Well, I have little time to work with other material. We did a new album, and my fellow musician, he had also June and Spire, and I really like this June and synthesizer a lot myself. It had some very interesting sounds. I like the FM8 from Native Instruments. So sometimes, it's and they sound different, and that's cool. I really, especially the June, I really very nice synthesizer.
Being a big Jupiter 8 guy,
Yeah.
do you ever tend to use any of the vintage plugin emulations, or do you
Not
prefer to just
really.
like when it comes to like Minimoog and Jupiter and that sort of thing? Do you prefer to just let me just track in my Jupiter as opposed to using the easy route of loading up a plugin?
No, I simply generate the sound as I would have programmed it on the. So, for other words, if I go to, let me show you something. If I go to synth sounds, um, okay, now I need to see, because what I want to say essentially, I make these sounds simply. This is also what I tell in this video about the Jupiter 8 and how I approach this sound in the plugins. Is that simply the way I program there? I program it also in Predator 2 or, for instance, Bluetooth. So if you would play our last album and you would hear a sound that sounds like, oh, this sounds like a Jupiter 8 pad, it's simply Predator 2 or Bluetooth simply programmed this way that it sounds with this character. So I was looking for a something which, of course, I not easily find. Let me see. I was looking for a lead sound, which is very similar to a Minimoog, which I very often use in my tracks to simply generate a Minimoog style lead sound. And I have a Minimoog here. That's right. It's down here behind me. But I'm so lazy that I'm simply do the sounds with the plugin, play it in, and so it's a kind of laziness also.
That's
Yeah, there.
the
Yeah.
Blue to Mini Blue in the Synth Leads 1 bank.
Synth leads. Oh, yeah. You're faster than me. Synth leads. Where's the synth leads one bank? Oh man, I'm blind. Synth leads. Why do you?
Yeah, in the bank, there should
Which
be
number?
bank number 5.
That's what you see. I need glasses.
5 should be it. Yeah, that's it.
It's the first preset. Oh, it's
Yep.
ridiculous. So that's simply two saw waveforms. You have a little detuning. I use the drifting, and it uses the 24 dB low pass filter, which is a Moog model filter. So I make simply the lead sound then in Bluetooth, or for instance Predator 2. It's how you create the sound to get it. So, and in the music, maybe if you have it A/B, then the Minimoog will win from it. But if you play this in the music, yeah, I need to have some very good ears not to recognize this as a mini moog style of lead sound. But I'm sorry, I'm very lazy. So even if I have this mini moog here, I just play with the plugins if I make music. And of course, it would be different if we would be on stage. Then I would grab the mini moog with me and play live on the mini moog because people like that. Picture that you see, for instance, we make synthesizer music and you see two guys with two laptops. It would be nice if you have some sequencer LEDs running, some modular stuff playing around, and some hardware synthesizers. The eye also needs something, of course.
I'm a big proponent of, for live shows, you should be performing, like giving a show. So
I agree. Yeah.
even if you're using rack gear and this and that, like to me, and even if you're using a laptop, you have to be doing like, and most of the large
Improvisation.
shows, people are doing that anyway. But I even on smaller shows, I just feel like if somebody's paying money to see what I'm doing, I need to
Hmm.
experience it. Not just kind of go and stare at what you could stare at on YouTube or whatever. But I want people to actually have an experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. We played in early '90s once live, and it was live played the full album and the most popular songs we had at that time. But then it sounds almost the same as the CD. I think you should do something different, improvisation, making another turn, and but of course, with this type of music I make, which is electronic music, it's not that easy. With dance music, sometimes you have a beat, you can give another beat, and it's. But I mean, from the guys who maybe know Klaus Schulze and his
Oh yeah,
album X, yeah, if you see Klaus Schulze, a big modeler, all these things, I mean, and the LEDs are running, or you are already in a
dance
kind of
floor
state of,
with these.
yeah.
But yeah, I've been so I have 3 children. I've got Kenny, who is my 19-year-old son. He's high functioning autistic, so we'll be doing the
Mm,
autism walk stuff soon. So if anybody wants to support on that, I'll have information on that soon. And then I have my daughter who's 12, and she's at the perfect age of like not wanting to hear what I have to say. And then I have my youngest, Ollie, who is 4, and I've
mm.
been he's been getting more and more interested into music lately, and he absolutely adores synthesizers. Ellie
Oh, cool.
is a little bit into it, Kenny not at all, but Ollie is all he wants to do is be in here. And I actually have he has his own setup now, which is kind of ridiculous, but
That yeah, but that's well, yeah. But otherwise, you get all your synthesizer rearranged.
he's got a Ultra Nova, a drum brew,
Ah,
and
cool.
I actually the first thing I gave him, and I know some people might freak out, but first thing I gave him was a Rhythm Wolf because it's like they're actually built really solidly, so it's like he couldn't break it if
Yeah.
he tried, and if he did break it, it wouldn't kill me. But but so I started introducing him to new music, and he's ever since he was born, he's been into some interesting music choices. Like when he was
Hmm.
an infant, he would scream and cry. And if Etta James came on, he would stop crying instantly and be looking for where the sound was coming from. And even to this
Interesting.
day, he's really, really into Etta James and he stops
Hmm.
everything to listen to her. So I started introducing him to some new music. Well, if people follow me on Instagram, they'll know about this. I started introducing him to Bjork, who I love.
Oh,
Uh,
beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. I
and
agree. Yeah.
so he's now to the point where he has memorized the names of all of her songs and like request songs. And again, he's only 4 and requests her songs.
Amazing.
And I started
Hmm.
showing him live performances because I actually prefer a lot of her live performances more than the album tracks. Like All Is Full of Love, she has a live performance that is stunning. And
Hmm.
her performance of Hyper Ballad live on YouTube, you can check it out. Her live performances are stunning because she brings her producers on stage and they are doing like foley on stage, like actually like stepping on rocks for the hi-hat sounds, and they have all this just wonderful layouts. Talk about doing electronic music with an amazing stage show that's really
Hmm.
interesting to look at, but also not taking away from the prime performer, which is obviously her voice. I mean, that to me, is something that's like just a extremely high level of performance.
Oh yeah, and then people have something to watch at because it's different. It's not having a perfect performance in which you hear the CD and in the same quality and then live, but it's different. I think that's yeah. I mean, we with our band we have a small audience. It's a very small community, and they ask us also if we would play live. The only problem is my music fellow is 200 kilometers living away from me. So that would be hard time to rehearse. But I think it only would make sense if we would have our known tracks played, but done in a different shape and with a different movement so that you surprise the people. And that's really essential. And I think with the all album sales going down, is that live performance is far more important these days for a band to survive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think is going to get really interesting with the movement of technology, like we were talking about earlier, with making computers more powerful, more small, and hardware being able to do more interesting things. So yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see where live performance goes in the next, 5 to 10 years, because it if you remember when the whole VST thing really started getting off the ground, there was the whole, "Oh, they're checking email on stage" kind of thing. And now then there came like what was it? The lemur? You remember that touchscreen lemur?
Yeah. Yeah.
You started seeing some innovation with that kind of thing, and more MIDI controllers, and now MIDI controllers like the oh, what is that? The new Novation one looks fantastic to me, because you have scribble strips for your knobs, and you have CV control, and you've got MIDI control, and you're starting to see that you can control your VSTs exactly like a hardware synth on stage, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
and also doing things. And today I had a Skype with a person who had with the hand you can move, and I don't recall the name anymore. It's a controller and a Gecko, and you can use it as MIDI controller. Opening your fingers, you get a different sound. And he was experiment together with this on Facto on the XY. So he was moving his hand, and he made a tutorial about it, but he said, well, don't share it now, because he wanted to make a shorter one, which is better. But he was moving a hand, and you saw the movement of the XY while he was playing the sound. So that's very interesting. Of course, Jean-Michel Jarre did this very early with this laser harp doing some hardware stuff. So yeah, this expression on synthesizers is very important to get a dynamic sound. And I'm pity that we lost a bit this breath controller feature, which is also very cool. You can make some dynamic sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we'll close it out. And I
Yeah,
really
definitely.
appreciate this talk. I mean, this has been fantastic. And I've been a fan since the Ensoniq days, honestly. I
Oh, that's early. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
what was it? The command station was one of the first pieces that I spent a good chunk of money for electronic music
Hmm.
production. Like
Hmm.
I came from like a more traditional like punk background before that. And then I
Okay,
switched
cool.
over into like hip hop production and whatnot, probably in the yeah, that would have been like probably 98, somewhere around there. 98, 2000, somewhere around there. And we were using like SP 1200, MPC 2000 when that first came out.
Yeah.
And I remember being scared to get the 2000 XL. I was scared to drop the money on it, because at that time I was still very young in production, and I was mainly going to other people's studios to
Hmm.
use their gear. So like I would travel to my buddy's studio, have a crate of records, and be like, okay, and he would have me, he would show me how to work the SP 1200 there. And when the 2000 XL came out, I was like, that looks like the greatest thing ever, because it had waveform editing on it and all that stuff. But I was super intimidated by it at the same time. So I ended up getting a command station. Um,
Hmm.
and man, I love the sounds in that thing. Like I had the command station, and then I got some of the expansions on there, and man, that thing was great. So
Yeah, definitely. It's pity that they are not around anymore because then Sonic had really its own sound and some very interesting ideas. For instance, the Acer 10 had this patch button where you could hit the button and then other layers could be active and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's pity that they are not around anymore.
yeah, I keep the what do we have? The SQ80 behind here because that thing
Ah,
is so underrated.
oh, definitely. Yeah, we did a whole album with the ESQ1 as sequencer and synthesizer because at that time the Atari's Pro 24 Steinberg did crash a lot, so we stopped that and we had this SP 1200 for syncing the tape recorder with the sequencer. So the SP 1200 together with the ESQ1 was our sequencer and recording thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I keep that here. I've got the ASRX is actually on the floor right here. The ASRX Pro.
Yeah.
But yeah, that stuff. I mean, those days, I actually had been trying to get what's his name from Insonic on the show, but he does not do interviews.
Oh, Tim Schwartz.
Yeah, does not do interviews.
Oh, that's pity. He's a very nice guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. From what I understand, uh, he refuses to have interviews because he just doesn't want any. Like, he's just happy where he is, and
Okay. Yeah. Well, everybody its own, of course. Yeah.
but like I said, it's to each his own, and that doesn't, that's fine. I'm not.
Yeah.
There's a great interview on Centaur. I want to see if I can show. It's basically they took a text interview and then like recreated it um to make it, because a text interview is a text interview. It's not quite the same.
Hmm.
Um So let me see if I can. I just want to see if I can find this real quick because it's really great. Um, Shoot. Oh, where is that? But Centaur, it's spelled Syntaur, and if you look it up, there's a great interview. Um, yeah, I think it's on YouTube. Let me just see this real quick because if I can share this link in the chat, I would love to do that.
Yeah. I'm checking the chat. I see this guy who made this video with the hand controller, Alexander van Aken. He will upload very soon a more. I need to get this. There's a little box. It's really great, and you move your hand. You can do all kind of interesting things with it.
It might be. I can't remember. It might be this Desert Island SQ80 video. I'm not sure. But man, it's a really great
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
really great interview out there, and yeah, it's definitely worth checking it out.
And that's the
Bob
one.
Yanis is who I'm thinking of. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's actually, what's crazy is like they were based not far from where I live. I live just outside of Philadelphia
Oh.
in Delaware. And he was based in Malvern, PA, which is like, I don't know, maybe
Hmm.
30, 40 minutes away. So
Okay.
yeah, I was really hoping to do that one day. I'm gonna get that damn interview. So
You're gonna drag him to your studio.
yeah, it'll happen one day. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I highly recommend people check it out. I'm gonna share the link in the chat.
Yeah,
Here it
that's
is.
cool.
Uh,
Yeah, and Alexander van Erken also responded. It's the Leak Motion. That's the controller, which is great for doing some MIDI stuff and by moving your hand.
oh, you know what? I had that, and my honest opinion is this. So I was the early Kickstarter guy for that, and
Yeah.
what I came to realize, it works pretty well. And it's probably even better now, like because it's been out for a while. So I'm sure there's been updates to it. But what I discovered is that I like tactile response, and my hands are already busy. So like, if
Yeah.
I'm mapping things to my hands in space, it's like, well, I'm already turning knobs and I enjoy like the tactile feedback of touching things and, that sort of thing. So for me, the leap motion, like it ended up being something that did not stick around for me. I would
Hmm.
actually rather have, um, you know, if it's not going to be a tactile response, then I need to know where my limits are. You know what I mean? Like I need to So there's a Eurorack module called the Vector, I think, and I've been considering getting that, and it does 3D space, but you have a limited range of that 3D space. I don't want to be like wondering where my limits are when I'm controlling something. You know what I mean? Like I want to know, okay, this is full max, you know what I mean? And this is bottom. So
Yeah, I believe he used also Gecko, it was called. And he could had a whole
yeah.
control screen. I will send you the link from his video when we are done with the interview, and then you can check it out. I think it's improved a lot.
And it's not that expensive either. I think it was like 50 bucks or something.
Yeah, the Leap, it's this device was about 100 bucks, I believe, and then you need some
Maybe it was
additional software
60.
to get the MIDI working, of course, to translate the movement into MIDI controllers.
Yeah, I think when it first came out, it was, or at least when it was a Kickstarter, it was less. Yeah, it's saying 89 bucks maybe. No, yeah, and you can get them used for like 50. Like I think
Oh, okay.
brand new
Yeah.
they're like probably 80, something like that. And I'll share this real quick just so that people know what we're talking about. That's always
Yeah, Alexander von Aken maybe can, if he wants, share his video, but I think he wants to make a new one. So I will send you the link to his video so that you can watch it out. But I thought it was interesting. He used Vecto and then moved his hand to move this XY around this panel. So that's, of course, Roland also has this beamer thing, which they have on some of their synthesizers
the
where you can, yeah, but that's more one direction, I think.
yeah, that's I mean, it's and like I said, I had it when it first came out, so I guarantee it's a whole lot better
Okay.
than it was. And it wasn't even that it was bad, to be honest with you, because it really wasn't that bad. For me, it was just like a mental thing where it was like, man, I want to know where my limits are.
Yeah, you need to connect with something, of course, and but maybe they, yeah, because this Alexander, the has the extended MPE. That's what he talks about. There was some you could limit certain ranges. You could have it a reset. So he shows this in the video. Think it's an interesting development that besides the modulation wheel, pitch band, and aftertouch, and maybe a ribbon controller, which is also cool, is that other controls add really interesting dynamics to sounds.
All right. Well, any last thing you want to plug before we head out?
Uh, yeah, I hope I don't look too old. I'm an old chap playing synthesizers already from age 15, so I hope I still look okay.
You're still fine. You're a
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
I'll
Yeah,
say,
thank you for having me, Ken. Thank you for having me. It was fun for me also. Always nice to chat with synth geeks about synthesizers.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and
Yeah,
that's what this is all about. My whole thing is that in this day and age, when I was 15, I was always curious about who the people were behind the gear. Like
yeah.
always more geeked about meeting somebody like Roger Lynn than
Hmm.
necessarily meeting DJ Premier. Like I was like, okay, I'm a huge fan of these guys, but man, like the people behind this stuff, like that's so crazy. So I try
Hmm.
to pass that information along now so that other people can wonder less and know more, you know?
Oh yeah, nice go. Yeah, perfect.
So, yeah, I'll say, I'm trying to think if I have anything to plug. I have a new sound pack for the MPC that's up on the MPC Expansion Exchange right now called Atmospheres. So you can go check that out. It's really a bunch of this gear used to create pad sounds, multi-sampled pad sounds for the MPC Live and MPC X. And there's also SynthK Volume 1, which again is kind of similar, but it's more broad as far as what kind of sounds are in it. And Micro Freaks coming soon. I'm finishing up some presets for that. And yeah, so should be cool. I'm going to post some video of this Behringer 808 again soon, too. I've been meaning to get back to that, but I just haven't had time to show anything. So, okay. Uh, Rob, you stay here. I'm going to stop the broadcast and thank everybody in the chat for coming in here. If you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to email or hit me up on Facebook. I'm very accessible. So there you go.